Almost from our very beginning, the history of mankind has been tied to the sea. Humans have always tended to live near water and constructed watercraft to explore, create trade routes, and expand our world. The history of shipbuilding is the history of mankind. David Warther has dedicated his life to preserving this history in antique ivory, abalone pearl, and ebony wood. The art of carving runs deep in the Warther family. David's great-great-grandfather was a carver in Switzerland in the mid-1800s. His grandfather was master carver Ernest Mooney Warther, a renowned artist who captured the history of steam engines in 64 exactingly detailed, fully operational scale models, also carved of ivory and rare woods. At a very young age, David himself began carving, working with scraps and leftovers from his grandfather's woodshop and hand tools from his father's knife factory. Very quickly, he was carving miniature ships from these beautiful natural materials. By age 6, he completed his first model, a replica of a Viking longboat made of wood.
I remember very clearly making my first ship. I found a piece of scrap wood on my dad's workshop floor. I picked it up to throw it away, but I looked at it first and I thought to myself, this looks like a ship. I can make a ship from this. When I made that ship that day, I was absolutely thrilled. I was thrilled making it, and I was thrilled with the resulting carving. And from that day until now, there has always been a ship on my workbench.
David works in 3 primary materials: antique ivory, ebony wood, and abalone pearl. The antique elephant tusks David carves from were purchased decades ago, prior to the ban on importation, and he continues to carve from this old legal stock. In recent years, most of the ivory for his carvings projects has been donated from other museums and collections. David is a lifelong advocate of wildlife conservation, especially as it pertains to elephants, and personally contributes to wildlife conservation efforts regularly. Ebony has a long history of uses dating back to ancient Egypt. It has a dense black texture that can be polished to a very smooth finish, making it very valuable as an ornamental wood. David purchases ebony through Kime Lumber, a local Amish sawmill that legally imports and sells exotic woods. Like ivory and ebony, the colorful iridescent shells of abalone have been used for centuries as decorative items and as a source of pearl for jewelry, buttons, and inlays. David cuts his own pearl from shells that have been in his family since his childhood.
Many people ask me how I got into working with these exotic and difficult to acquire materials. The truth is, I never got out of using them. My dad was a knife maker and my grandfather a carver. They both worked in these materials. When I was a kid back in the 60s, my dad was making ivory, ebony, and abalone handled knives, and Grandpa used the same materials to make his train carvings. There were always scraps around the shop, so I grew up with these materials. Looking back, I now attribute working in miniature to the fact that I was given such small pieces of scrap to work with when I was a kid.
David Warther Carvings is a non-profit organization dedicated to preserving and displaying David's life work. The 10,000 square foot Hilltop Exhibit Building is located near Walnut Creek in the heart of Ohio's Amish community. The museum houses over 80 carvings and is divided chronologically into 4 large rooms that surround David's workshop. There is an ancient room, medieval room, a room dedicated to the age of exploration, and another to the age of sail. A natural history display includes ivory tusks and teeth from ancient and modern animals, including woolly mammoth, mastodon, and the Arctic narwhal. These are all historical sources of ivory. Framing the doorway between the exhibit and the workshop are a pair of African elephant tusks weighing 130 pounds each. These are the third largest tusks on display in the United States. Friendly, knowledgeable tour guides, many of them descendants of Amish and Mennonite families who sailed to America in the 17 and 1800s, guide visitors through the rooms, telling of how the carvings were built, explaining the features of ship design, and detailing the history of trade routes used in medieval and Renaissance Europe. The collection features many historical and famous watercrafts. One of the oldest is Pharaoh Cheops' ship from Egypt, dating to 2600 BC. Cheops, also known as Khufu, was responsible for building the largest of the Great Pyramids at Giza. This ship was his personal luxury yacht on which he sailed up and down the Nile. Upon his death, the ship was dismantled and buried in a boat grave near the base of the Great Pyramid, where it lay forgotten until it was rediscovered by accident in 1953. The Age of Exploration collection allows visitors to see some of the world's most famous ships, captained by the great explorers as they set out into the unknown. Among the remarkable carvings in this collection are the Pilgrim's Mayflower, Henry Hudson's Half Moon, Captain Cook's Endeavour, and Christopher Columbus's Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria.
I started carving ships when I was 6. For the first 10 years or so, all of the carvings were straight out of my imagination. My skills slowly improved, and during this time, I spent an evening perfecting the filing and sanding technique I used for making the ivory threads that I use for rigging lines. As with most of my work, the trick was finding a way to hold the material as I shape it. I found that by placing a strip of ivory into a grooved steel block, I could file over top of the block while rotating the ivory with my other hand. This allowed me to quickly hand turn a square piece of ivory into round. By working carefully and moving to smaller and smaller grooves, I'm able to work the ivory down to 7/1000 of an inch in diameter, or about twice the thickness of a human hair. At this minute size, the ivory is flexible and is easy to incorporate into the carving. Ivory carvers have always avoided relying on any glue when assembling their carvings. The reason is that ivory will outlive any glue. So if I were to glue my carvings together, eventually the glue would deteriorate and the carving would fall apart. Grandpa taught me how to use ivory pegs and pins to hold the carvings together. In this way, even the simplest of ships are structurally fitted together with hundreds of these extremely small pegs and pins. It creates a lot of extra work, but by building in this way, the carvings will last forever.
One of the most difficult aspects of working at this size is holding on to the material while David shapes it. To hold some of the smallest parts while carving, David will bond them onto a piece of wild cherry. Cherry is a very weak wood, so once the part is complete, he can pop it off the handle and then shave any remaining wood from the ivory. Because of the level of detail put into his carvings, it can take David anywhere from 2 months to a year and a half to complete a project. Sections of ivory are cut from the tusks using a bandsaw. Then jeweler's saws are used to cut the sections into rough shapes. Next up, files, sandpaper, and fine scrapers are used to complete the final shaping. Knives are used for carving figureheads and for the intricate fitting work of nearly all parts. Finally, each piece is polished using tiny buffing wheels spinning in a drill press. But before a knife ever touches ivory, David exhaustively researches his projects. Through his long relationship with nautical museums, archaeologists, and historians, David is often able to acquire original blueprints, detailed schematics, and vintage photographs of the ships he's working on. During the carving process, David continually refers back to his reference material to make sure that no detail is overlooked. And the work doesn't end with just getting the shapes, textures, and proportions correct. David also utilizes a technique known as scrimshaw to engrave details into the surface of the carvings. Scrimshaw is the ancient art of engraving lines into pieces of bone, tooth, or ivory with sharp metal tools and then applying a colorant to make the lines more visible and permanent.
I started scrimshawing when I was a kid, and it was difficult to learn because nobody in my family had ever done it before. Up until then, I had great teachers in my father and grandfather. This I had to figure out on my own. The only scrimshaw tools are templates and guides that I cut from large sheets of plastic and a sharp metal scribe. I make my scribes from old drill bits that I grind to a point where the steel is still tempered. With the scribe, I score fine lines in the polished ivory surface, exposing the more porous texture underneath. Next, I apply ink to the area with a Q-tip, let it dry, and then wipe off the excess. The ink wipes cleanly off the highly polished top surface, but attaches to the exposed porous ivory underneath, leaving fine lines and shapes. Using this technique, I can make the planking, doors, windows, and other details on board the ships come to life.
David Warther Carvings is a nonprofit organization supported by admissions to the museum, donations, and gift shop sales. The gift shop has become a destination unto itself, with unique items appealing to visitors of all ages, and the gigantic stone fireplace creates a warm, inviting environment in which to shop and relax. The museum and gift shop are nestled in the gently rolling farmland in the center of Ohio's Amish community, between Walnut Creek and Sugar Creek on State Route 39. David's workshop is located in the center of the carving exhibit. As tours near completion, he is almost always there to greet visitors, answer questions, and explain his carving techniques. David's work has repeatedly earned national praise and recognition. Officials from the Mariners Museum at Newport News, Virginia, lauded David's work as being extraordinarily exquisite carvings, beyond compare. At Mystic Seaport in Connecticut, curators declared that Warther's work epitomizes the highest level of achievement in maritime art. And in 1995, David received the Governor's Award for the Arts, the highest award bestowed on an artist in the state of Ohio. Guests regularly comment that David Warther Carvings was the highlight of their trip to Ohio's Amish country, while others have traveled great distances just to see the collection and meet the carver. Warther's is a pleasant place to visit for every member of the family, any season of the year. Church and social groups schedule dinner tours at Warther's as a great way to conclude their visit to Ohio's Amish country. From individuals to large groups, from children to seniors, visitors enjoy and learn from the unique exhibit of fine artwork at David Warther Carvings.
To those of you who have visited David Warther Carvings, I want to express a sincere thank you. I extend an open invitation to stop in again soon to re-explore the artwork, dig deeper into the stories of the ships, and to see what I've completed since you were here last. To any of you who have yet to visit, I extend a friendly welcome, and I hope you can visit us soon. For hours, directions, and other information, please visit our website at warther.org.